showtime. Welcome to the show. I'm Brent, Holland. Settle in, folks. It's blustery out there. The winds are blowing right across Lake Ontario tonight. Perfect night for you guys to settle in your easy chair because we're going to be talking about a ghost story tonight. Just let me read this, folks. And this is from our guest tonight, Gary Jansen's book called Holy Ghosts. And this is an account from 2007 from right directly in Gary's son's bedroom. Get ready. As I reached into his dresser drawer, I felt something very strange behind me. Startled, I quickly turned around. There was nothing there. I shrugged it off, grabbed the socks, and as I was walking to the doorway, experienced a very odd phenomenon, sort of like an electrical hand rubbing the length of my back. I stopped and stood transfixed. What the hell is that? I said to myself. The pressure then seemed to break apart, and for a brief moment, I felt I had a little million bugs crawling all over my back. Within seconds, however, the sensation was gone. Thus began, folks, a series of strange and disturbing encounters over the course of a year, culminating in Gary's conviction that his house is indeed haunted. Folks, this is a true ghost story. Settle in, get the coffee going, get the tea going, get in your comfy chair. If you're driving on the 401, the Trans-Canada, ease off that gas pedal. We're going to take you on a journey for the next hour. And what's really chilling is this journey is true. Strap in and hang on. Here we go.
There is a time to question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Welcome, one and all. Welcome to Night Fright. I'm your host, Brent Holland. Our guest tonight, Gary Jansen, has a book out called Holy Ghosts. He was haunted for over a year in his house. We're going to jump in right away. I'm going to welcome Gary to the show. Welcome, Gary. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Brent. Thanks so much for having me.
When I read this account of what took place in your son's bedroom, it sent chills up and down my spine. Was this the beginning of the haunting? Was this midway through? Was this what happened near the end? How did all this begin for you?
That really was the beginning of what turned out to be a year-long haunting. And it began just as you described it from what you read. You know, I went upstairs to get my son a pair of socks one evening in March. And all of a sudden, I felt something like course up and down my back. And the way I described it was as if someone was wearing an invisible glove, an electrified glove, and just kind of started rubbing the length of my back. And then it quickly disappeared. And I guess growing up, you know, as a member of the ADD generation, by the time I got downstairs and handed my wife the socks to put on my son, I forgot about it. Except that it kept happening in the house. And it only seemed to be happening in my son's room, but only when I was in my son's room by myself. If my son was with me, nothing happened. If my wife was with me, nothing happened. If the two of them were with me together, nothing happened. But if I went in there to drop something off or to pick something up or to look for something, I'd get that strange sensation that just started, you know, it kind of electrified my body.
You know, this begs several questions. I'm going to start off with some basic ones. How long were you in the house and how old's your son?
Yeah, my son was 3 at the time, and we had been in the house for about 6 years. But it was my ancestral home, I suppose. I'd moved in there with my family when I was 6, and between 6 and 7. They had started renovating when I was 6, and we moved in when I was about 7. And so I lived there for a number of years, and then moved away and did my own thing. But back in 2001, my mom, after having a divorce with my dad, asked if we would buy the house, my wife and I. And at first we were kind of apprehensive about it, but we decided to just take the leap and to do it. So we bought the house, and my mom moved away. Now, when I was growing up, we would hear weird things in the house, and my mom was always convinced that the house was haunted, that there was a ghost in the house. But my dad was just a working class Joe. He didn't believe in anything he couldn't see, and he never saw anything, even though he did hear these things. But he would just use this kind of the house is settling, excuse. The house is settling, or just don't worry about it. It's nothing to worry about. But my mom always thought it was something else, and my mom would have she would see things and she would experience things, and we experienced them as well. But when we moved back in the house in 2001, it was pretty quiet until 2007, and then the house got very, very active.
You say when you were a kid. By the way, folks, we're speaking with Gary Jansen. His book is called Holy Ghosts, How a Not-So-Good Catholic Boy Became a Believer in Things That Go Bump in the Night.
You're listening to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. The time is now. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Easy way to get this book, folks. As always, just go to the www.nightfrightshow.com website. Click on the book cover. That'll take you right to a place where you can order this book from the comfort of your own home. And tonight's a perfect night for that. I look out across Lake Ontario every night, folks, and I can see the clouds are just swirling around. There's lightning across the lake. Great night to settle in and listen to this true ghost story. Gary, for the folks that are listening on the radio as well, are you sitting in your son's room right now?
No, actually, I'm sitting, this room, there is a part of the book that takes place in this room. This is actually my son's toy room / computer room. So there is a scene in the book where something happens that's very out of the ordinary that startled me one night. So that takes place. That's where I'm sitting right now.
Can you tell us that story?
Sure. Things had been going on for at least 6 months, and at this time, I was never really a believer in ghosts, for lack of a better word. Even though my mom was a big believer in these things, and she told us plenty of stories and said that the house was haunted, I kind of sided more with my dad. So, and I just kind of grew up to be a rationalist and never really gave the paranormal or ghosts really a second thought. I'd like to watch a movie from time to time or read a book, but that was about it. But about 6 months into it, I started doing research because, things so many things out of the ordinary had been happening. So I started reading up about paranormal things and started doing research and looking at the history of hauntings and the history of haunted houses. And while there's really not a lot of physical evidence that you can duplicate in a laboratory to prove that paranormal activity or anything like that is real, there's plenty of historical evidence that you can just pile up from reputable sources that make you come to believe it. Helped me believe that there is something going on. What that really is, I'm not sure any of us really have the full answer. But one night, I'd fallen asleep while doing some research on the couch, and when I woke up, I saw a woman standing in the doorway of this room, and it kind of startled me, and I closed my eyes, and quickly she disappeared. So I thought maybe it was just a fragment of a dream that was left over. But then I started hearing bells, which isn't necessarily out of the ordinary because we live down this street from a cathedral. So we do hear bells from time to time, but not at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I started hearing the bells start getting a little bit louder, and I sit up and I'm listening, and then I get up to just investigate, and then the bells all of a sudden go away, or not go away, but then I start hearing drums too playing at the same time. So I walk into my son's room where the computer is, and the computer had switched on, and iTunes had kicked in, and Hell's Bells by AC/DC was playing on my computer. Now, I was convinced that I had turned the computer off. iTunes had not been playing. As far as I know, maybe it was open, but I definitely had nothing playing. And there's a line...
But of all songs... Oh my God.
It scared the hell out of me, because, you're startled from sleep, and then you walk in, and there's Hell's Bells, and there's a line in it that says, "I'll give you black sensations going up and down your spine," which is, that's what was happening to me, in the house. And I just looked at the computer and said something just like, "You gotta be kidding me. This can't be happening." And I switched it off, and I just felt very, very uneasy. And there are other things building up to this, just more strange sensations that were going on in the house. We would see shadows. First, I just saw them, and then my wife saw them. Then my son refused to go back into his room. He would only sleep with us in our bed. And these things all have, they can all have logical explanations. Kids don't want to sleep in their beds. They want to sleep with their parents a lot of times. Or you'll hear weird noises that could be coming from the outside or coming from a mouse or something. But things just stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked until it just seemed that all this kind of evidence pointed to something beyond this world.
You're listening to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. The time is now. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Folks, Gary Jansen's our guest tonight. Get the comforter up. That's all I can tell you. He's telling us a true ghost story from the very house he's sitting in right now, from the very room he's sitting in. It doesn't get any more real than that, does it, folks? Settle in, get comfy, because there's more to this story, and we're going to explore the origins of it, and we're going to explore the hauntings that took place over the course of a year. The book is called Holy Ghosts. Our guest tonight, Gary Jansen, is the author and experienced this true and live. Easy way to get the book, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on the book cover. As always, we'll take you right to a place where you can get this book. And, the summer's perfect time for a book like this. You're up at the cottage, folks. You want to relax. The kids are asleep. You take the book out and start reading it and scare the hell out of yourself. And it's a true story on top of that. Gary, let's go back to the woman you saw in that very room you're sitting in right now. And folks, for you on the radio, I'll just try and describe the room. It looks an ordinary bedroom, 10 by 12, I would say. Some nice little stars. It's his son's playroom. He's probably, 8 or 9 now, but he was 3 at the time.
Yeah, he's going to be about 8 soon.
Going to be 8? Okay. This woman you saw, was she clothed in today's regalia, if you will? Was she in Victoria wear? Did you recognize her at all?
No, she didn't. She definitely wasn't wearing contemporary clothes. I mean, it was more, early part of the 20th century, I would say. And she didn't look Victorian, but she looked like in a very simple house dress. But, it definitely gave me the feeling that she was much older than that. And when I was a kid, my mom would say that there was an older woman from the turn of the century who lived in our house, this ghost, and she would move from the front door of the house to the front window, or the window in the front of our house, so this big picture window that we have. And she'd kind of move back and forth, kind of look around as if she was looking for someone outside, and that would really be it. And I remember asking my mom, is that something I should be afraid of? And she said, absolutely not. She's not bothering us. She's just here. And my mom never really went further than that, though she would tell us different stories or things when we were growing up. And
shared residence, Gary, but was she paying rent? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just trying to lighten it up in case there's kids watching.
We should have charged her, I mean, times are rough now, so.
I hear you, my friend. Did she feel evil when you saw her in the doorway? Did she, I guess right away as a parent, I would be concerned for the safety of my child and my family.
Yes.
Same thing with you?
Well, yes. I mean, I think it really took me about 6 months before I really started to believe that there was something extraordinary going on in the house, and it wasn't just coincidence or stress or having a bad day. And once that happened, I mean, what really kind of set it off, and happened just around the 6-month mark, is that my son kind of refused to go back into his room. And that's where I was feeling the bulk of these sensations. And that made me very nervous. But at the same time, I didn't feel like what was in the house was evil. It felt disturbing, it felt uneasy, but I didn't feel this kind of sense of, wow, there's some kind of, crazed demon in here, or I could have been wrong. But there was, there's something, definitely felt like there was a presence, but it didn't feel evil. And so, of course, I felt, I want to be able to protect my kids. But at the same time, I really was dealing with this kind of like healthy skepticism, is this really happening? I don't know. I mean, this doesn't happen, does it? But, you start investigating and you realize, wow, it happens much more often than you think.
Did you have conversations with your son? He's only 3, I know, but I've had other folks that have been on the show with kind of similar stories, but much, much more disturbing. Where, if you will, a demon had entered the house and the kids could see it. Did you have conversations with your son to find out what he was afraid of, what he was seeing, that type of thing?
I did. I mean, but not. I never put it in the. Parameters or the context of, are you seeing a ghost? Are you seeing a demon? Are you seeing anything like this? I just asked him what was wrong, and he would just kind of like go mute and would say nothing. And just say, I just want to be with you guys. I just want to be with you guys. I don't want to go in there. I just don't want to go in there. And so that was really, that was really the extent of it. And we just kind of like left it alone, my wife and I. And but what would happen in the house is that my son's electric toys would turn on and then turn off. And again, these things happen. Bad batteries or short. But we would get rid of things, and other things would just start turning on and turning off by themselves. And one night I had actually, before my son had decided, he's not going in that room anymore, we switched spots because he just was kind of restless. So he went to go sleep with my wife, and I just took his bed because I needed to get up early the next morning. And as I'm sleeping, I experienced something that 100 years ago or 200 years ago is called old hag syndrome. And old hag syndrome is this sensation where you feel like you're being pressed down into bed. Like you'll wake up and you feel like there's something on your chest. And it's been depicted in art and songs have been written about it. And they called it the old hag syndrome. In the 20th century, they call it sleep paralysis, that there's a problem with your REM sleep, and that, while your mind wakes up, your body hasn't. So you have this kind of sensation of feeling paralyzed. But science hasn't been able to prove why so many people who experience sleep paralysis, including myself this one time, why you see this dark shadow that kind of appears in the room that you're in, and why you feel this sense of evil foreboding. And as I was experiencing this in my son's room and just feeling this presence just kind of push me down, and I'm struggling to just kind of get out of it, I finally call out to God to just kind of save me, and it goes away. But the scary thing that freaked me out, and I did not move out of the bed for 5 minutes, was that my son's electric cars turned on. And I just sat there, laid there transfixed until I yelled, cut and you can fill it in, and it stopped. It just stopped. And again, this is just one experience that just kind of stacked on top of others' experiences, over the course of, 365 days.
You're listening to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. The time is now. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Oh my God, folks, Gary Jansen's our guest tonight. If you're just joining us, we're talking about a true haunting that took place right in the very room that he's sitting in right now, by the way, folks, in the very house. Very, very unnerving, without question. The book is called Holy Ghosts, and it's called How a Not-So-Good Catholic Boy Became a Believer in Things That Go bump in the night. www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover that's associated with today's guests, and that'll take you right to a place where you can order this book online. Do it, folks, and get ready to have the bejesus scared out of you. It's a true ghost story. It doesn't get any more real than this. Gary, you had mentioned that your son, you didn't want to let him go back in the room, and this hag story, you know, folks, many of you are not aware, but when we sleep, our body secretes a certain chemical, if you will, so that we don't get up and start walking around and things like that, to appease our resting body, and so our muscles don't move in that. And this is what science is trying to come to grips with. But as Gary just reiterated, why this shadow? Why this sense of foreboding that is accompanied with this sensation in so many people? In my own opinion, I think there is definitely something there. Perhaps people are able to cross over easier when we're sleeping. I don't know, but there definitely is something. Gary, let's go back to this story. Did you think about moving that morning when you woke up? Because personally, I would have bolted for the door, eh? Like, I'm a big sissy when it comes to stuff like this, you know? Full moon, I'm gone.
I'm a big sissy too. I found out that I was a big sissy during a lot of this. There were times where I felt like we should move, and some of the scary instances, also, am I doing my family a disservice by staying here? Something tells me to just sit still and just ride it out. Many, many years ago, this very, very wise woman told me, rule number one, and rule number one for her was, I'm like, what's rule number one? Do nothing. and I'm like, do nothing? What do you mean do nothing? You got to do things in life. And she said, just keep that in mind. And I've kept it in mind for over 20 years. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't take action, but you should always think before you act. So so I would use that going through, if something happened, well, do nothing. Think about this first. What's really going on? And I think part of me was saying, there's something mysterious, there's something very creepy going on here. Should I be afraid? I don't know. Things do up a bit later on, and I realized that there's not just one ghost in the house, but there may be others as well. And that's, but throughout it was rule number one, do nothing, wait.
Gary, the woman, the hag, if you will, during that sleep paralysis moment, did you feel she was the same woman? Because you mentioned evil, and I asked you specifically before, the woman you saw standing in the room you're in right now didn't feel evil. Seemed to be the same person, seemed to be the same entity, or completely different, eh?
Whoa.
Yeah, I think it felt, when I felt that thing, like that kind of sensation running down my back, the which folks out there, I didn't write the book actually to try to convince skeptics, but just to say this is my experience. A lot of people have said, "Wow, maybe you just had a pulled nerve." Look, I wouldn't have written the book if I had a pulled nerve. There was that sensation had a very distinct kind of feeling to it, and this thing with sleep paralysis, well, that was something else. And then I realized that, as months wore on, that there may have been something that I brought into the house that upped the ante. It's almost as if you're, you have something, it's almost like you have a small fire, but then you do something to throw gasoline on it.
Can you explain what you mean by that? Do you think you opened up a portal somehow?
Well, I think the book does talk a lot about curses, and I didn't know much about curses. My wife's family comes from Italy. They talk about curses all the time. They talk about the evil eye, the malocchio, and it was something I never really bought into. But can we, with the words that we say and the things that we do, unknowingly curse someone or something without even knowing that we're doing it? And so that becomes a big part of the book. Because there may have been an instance where I said something that I probably shouldn't have said. It was really kind of out of character for me, but maybe it unlocked something, or at least got the attention of someone who, that it was pointed at, who had passed on. And then maybe that person or that thing or that entity, just kind of had a little bit of vendetta against me. So,
was that a friend, a relative that had passed on?
No, it was it was a stranger, and it was what happens and how we come to kind of know some of this is that I reached out to a woman named Marianne Winkowski, and then Marianne Winkowski is she's someone who sees ghosts, and she was the inspiration for the TV show The Ghost Whisperer with Jennifer Love Hewitt. The show has been canceled, but it's still in reruns, and it was very popular for a long time. But Marianne was the woman who inspired that show, and a friend of mine had recommended I reach out to her, and it was kind of the last thing I wanted to do. It took me almost 7 months before I said, you know what, there's enough weird stuff going on in the house that maybe I should seek an expert's advice. And I felt really uncomfortable about asking a priest,
Why so? Could you tell us a little bit about that? You're right, You're a good Catholic boy.
Well,
not so good Catholic boy.
Catholic boy, which is, and I put some of those things in the book, folks. But for me, at the time, I was really thinking about becoming a deacon for the Catholic Church. I'd gone to Catholic school for 12 years and kind of, I don't want to say fell away in a horrible way. I just kind of had my own thing to do and wasn't focusing on God or anything like that. But as I got a little bit older, I felt like maybe this was something that I was being called to do, which is to become a deacon. And so I'd talked, I'd made friends with a number of priests, but these guys were really intellectuals, they just, it almost to the point where the idea of spirit was very, very secondary and tertiary to them, but it was the intellect. If you're going to know God, you know God through the mind. So for me to say, hey guys, I got a ghost in my house, seemed overly superstitious and something I felt really uncomfortable and a bit embarrassed to tell them about. And so instead I reached out to this woman, Marianne, and it was kind of an anonymous thing because she didn't know anything about me, and she was going to give me a reading over the phone. She was going to be able to tell whether or not, there was anything in the house. And I don't know how she could do that, but I just eventually just said, let's just try it. I'll do it, I feel a little uncomfortable, but let's try it. And we get on the phone, we start talking, and she starts, telling me about my house and how my house looks, and and the way it's set up and what I'm experiencing, even though I haven't told her anything. And very, very specific things about colors of the rooms and things that, unless she was reading my mind, no one else really would have known about. And then she says, well, you have two things in your house. You have an older woman, kind of turn of the century. She hangs out downstairs. She kind of walks from the front door to the picture window as if she's looking for someone. And I'm getting goosebumps now, actually, just talking about it. But that was what my mom had told me over the years growing up, to the T. And she didn't know my mom. She didn't know who I was. You couldn't look me up on the internet back then and find out any of this information. I never told anybody, maybe my wife. My wife had never spoken to her. But then she said, her I'm not worried about. And when she said there were two things, and if she's not worried about that thing, then we have to infer that she was worried about the second one. And I'm like, well, that must mean that the other one, whoever is in here, is not good. And she said, yeah, I don't like this one. He's a bit of a troublemaker. He. And she said, and what's weird is that the older woman's been in the house for a very, very long time. This guy has only been here about a year. And I called her in early March of the following year. So almost a year to the day that those things started happening, she had said that this has only been going on for a year. And she said, Gary, I hate to tell you this, but he's standing, and as she was saying this, all of a sudden I feel this stuff just course through my back. She says, he's standing right on top of you right now.
Oh my God.
And all of a sudden I was just like, what the hell are you talking about? And I was freaked out, and then all of a sudden your imagination just starts running wild. You feel this you've been feeling this sensation in the house, and even before she gets the words out, you start feeling this, and then she says exactly, and I hadn't even tell her what I was feeling, that whatever it was on top of me and wasn't very happy with me.
Did she describe the entity at all? What he was wearing, what he looked like, anything like that you could relate to?
Well, she did. She didn't say what he was wearing, but gave me an age, thought she was giving me his name, and which seemed vaguely familiar. But then I realized, no, you're talking about a town that's in the same county. It's not next door to us, but it's not, it's not 100 miles away either. And then all of a sudden I started thinking, oh, wait a minute, why do I know this? And it took me a little while, but then I started realizing that this person that she was talking about had died, the year before, and I had said something. So what happened was, I'd read in the newspaper about this young man dying in a car accident, and it seemed to be his fault, and he seemed to be hot dogging and caused an accident that could have killed other people. Now, part of the story is that I began feeling those sensations a couple days after my wife miscarried in our house.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And he ended up dying on the same day that my wife miscarried. And after I'd read this story, I got so filled with anger toward this guy because we had just lost a potential child, and I felt bad for his family. So I said something really, really nasty, like that I wouldn't normally say. Did he hear it? Did his soul hear it? Well, how does he travel? Among the dead.
I can absolutely understand the emotions you were going through, because here's a young guy that's thrown his life away recklessly, and you've just lost a child of your own, a life that you had no control over. So I completely understand that.
You're listening to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. The time is now. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Folks, our guest tonight, I'm riveted to this seat. If I had a comforter right now, folks, it'd be up over my head, because this is a true ghost story. If you're just joining us, settle in. Lots of time left. We've got over a half hour left, folks, and get ready to be creeped out for real. This is a true ghost story. Gary's joining us live right from his house where the ghost story took place. And folks, it's just getting creepier and creepier as we're going along. I can't say enough about Gary's book. It's called Holy Ghosts, How a Not-So-Good Catholic Boy Became a Believer in Things That Go Bump in the Night. www.nightfrightshow.com, www.nightfrightshow.com. That's the website, folks. I've made it a focal point for the show. Everybody can go there whenever you want. You can download these shows free afterwards. If you're listening on the radio right now and for some reason you have to stop the car or whatever, if you're watching on television, you can go to the website, download the shows for free in their entirety. You can click on the book cover associated with each guest's show. That'll take you right to a place right away where you can order their books online. And this is a perfect book for the summer, folks. If you go into the cottage and you want a scary read late at night, like it is right now, I'm looking out over Lake Ontario, and I'm telling you, the wind's blowing right across this lake tonight, folks. And I can see the lightning in the distance. It's foreboding. It's ominous. This is a perfect night to read a book like this and settle in and watch Night Fright. Let's go back to Gary now. And, this thing is escalating. You've contacted Marianne. Did she have any recommendations for you, Gary? Like, get the hell out of there, or get a priest over? Right away, I default to a priest. Like Protestant guys just don't carry it. You have to get a Catholic in there. Catholic. Did she have any recommendations for you?
She did. And one, she did say, you should get the house blessed. but it has to be done in the right way. She said that too often a priest will come in to bless a house, but will do just a generic kind of blessing. And essentially what you're doing is you're blessing the entity that's inside the house. So there's a certain form of house blessing, which is a minor form of exorcism that should be performed, and that you should ask your priest to do something like that. If you feel like there's something inside there, her recommendation is to try to get a priest to go in there. And the thing was that I had a priest in the house, prior when we moved into the house. When we moved in the house in 2001, he was a friend of ours. He blessed the house, and and it made me laugh to think that that he was going around sprinkling holy water and saying prayers, and the ghost lady was thank you, Father. But she didn't go anywhere. And she didn't say that you should get out. She said that we need to get rid of them. And she gave me some instructions. She sent me some stuff, essentially a sage stick, which made me a little nervous, actually, because kind of like going back to Catholicism, my faith, it says very explicitly in the Catechism, you shouldn't talk with mediums. You shouldn't be talking to the dead. But there always seem to be these kind of, weird parallels. When you go to a Catholic funeral, what do they do except burn incense, around a coffin, right? Because they're trying to raise the spirit up to heaven. And it's also, used for sensory, for the senses, to try to get you into a form of prayer and a sense of focus. But this is what Native Americans have done their whole entire life. So essentially what she was telling me to do is no real different than what a priest does, except that a priest was doing it, and then I was a lay person doing it. So she gave the recommendation to go around and smudge the house. And it took me a little while before I got comfortable to do that, but I had done research just, when she said to do that, I was a little freaked out, but then looked at, I just began to see parallels with, what the church does. And the other thing is that we, the Catholic Church says obviously don't speak to the dead. I mean, necromancy is, something that's forbidden. Yet we do pray to saints, and that's talking to the dead as well. So, so much of it has to do with intent. And so where the title of the book or the subtitle comes from, a not so good Catholic boys, I do a few things that I know Catholics would say, absolutely not, you should not do that. But I didn't do them half-heartedly, or I really put a lot of, thinking into this in just about every step that I took. So those were the big things: smudge the house, get it blessed by a priest, and and then she was going to give me further instructions on how to get rid of them.
You're listening to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. The time is now. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Folks, Gary Jansen's our guest tonight. We're talking about his book, Holy Ghosts. It's a true haunting that took place right where he's living right now and broadcasting from. If you're watching on television or listening on the radio, he's virtually sitting in the room where a lot of this creepy, evil stuff took place, and it's a true ghost story. Easy way to get his book, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on the book cover, order the book, folks. You're going to enjoy it. Maybe perhaps that's the wrong word. You're going to be creeped out by it, but it's a true ghost story. This is the perfect season for that, folks, because, you're up at the cottage or, the kids are asleep. Finally, after being out of school, you want to sit down, relax, enjoy a good book, enjoy a good story, and it's a true story. Good book for you, folks. Holy Ghosts. Gary, here you are. You're a young man with a wife, a young family, 3-year-old that won't sleep in the room anymore, wants to sleep with his mom and dad. All these creepy things going on. You've just had Marianne tell you that there's this entity standing virtually right over you when you're speaking on the phone with her. My first inclination right there would have been to move my family out. Perhaps I would have stayed to battle this thing. Did you want to move your family out at all? I know that's a financial strain and everything, but as an extension of that, I guess you must have been asking, why me?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, great questions, Brent. I think my first inclination was, let's just get the heck out of here. But Marianne did reassure me. She said, look, don't. Here's the secret. Just don't talk to them. Because if you talk to them, you engage them. And she said that the more you engage them, the more that they hang around and the more active that they get. So don't talk to them. Which, as soon as you tell someone don't do something, you automatically want to do the opposite. But I really did kind of refrain from it. And she said, look, you don't have to be worried. I don't like that other one, but he's not evil. He's not a demon. He's actually a human spirit. And the thing is that the difference between demons and the difference between a demon and a ghost is the ghost lived on Earth at one point, was a human being. A demon is a non-bodied entity, which
it's an entity unto itself.
Exactly. It never had a physical body, though. That's right. Though it can manifest things or create turmoil or just influence us, or influence your senses. Whether or not they can actually materialize, I don't know. But can they affect your senses? I think yes, they can. And so I think the feeling was, yeah, let's move. But as you said, it's financial concerns and nothing really terrible has happened. Weird stuff has happened, but nothing terrible. I don't want people to be disappointed too when they read the book. This book is not like Amityville Horror where there's blood dripping and and there's axes flying and all that. It was just really, really spooky stuff that just kind of piled on top of each other. And it was like, wow, this is what when people have real hauntings in their house, this is what's going on. And I think the more and more you do research, the more and more you read that people experience the sort of thing that I experienced. Very few people kind of experience that kind of crazy, sensational stuff.
I guess, Gary, I'm going to come back to that why me thing because, it's not like it's a horror movie where you just turn it off and you go to bed and yeah, you're a little bit disturbed. You may have a bad dream or something. This is a constant thing going on and it's real. All of a sudden it's crossed that fine line between horror and reality, if you will, pretend, which you see on TV and the movies, etc. And all of a sudden this is the real deal going on. How did you handle that psychologically?
Yeah, I think, while all this was going on, I was actually doing work on another book called Exercising Your Soul, which was based on the spiritual practices and exercises of St. Ignatius. And so I was doing a lot of spiritual exercises, before this stuff started happening and while it was going on. And so I was praying every day and meditating every day. I was getting up early to do all this stuff. And I think so when you ask for the why me, I think that meditation and prayer and that sense of quiet helped me become more aware of something that may have been, obviously the one that had been in the house for a long time, but made me much more aware of something else that had entered as well. Now, maybe this happens to everybody all the time, but if you're not in a sense of quiet, if you don't have a sense of quiet or a sense of stillness within you, you may not even experience it. You may not even feel it. These things could be happening to, your next door neighbor, but they think it's just nothing. They write it off or they don't even feel it because there isn't this sense of quiet and stillness. And I ride the subway to work every day, and if you were to ask me what does the person look like that I stood next to on the subway this morning, I couldn't tell you, and that's a living person that's standing right in front of me that I just ignored because you just get this kind of like strange tunnel vision when you're commuting every day.
You zone out.
You zone out, and if you're zoning out physically with people or with people who are physical bodies in front of you, think about how we zone out to the spiritual world. If there, I do believe that there's a spiritual world, and it could be around us all the time. I believe it is, but I think if you're not, a lot of people just don't even know it's around them. They may be experiencing stuff and writing it off, or just not even. They're just zoned out to it. So I think that's part of the reason, which is the why me is I think I was partly just tuned into it at the time in a way that I'd never been before in my entire life, because the meditation and prayer was so deep during that 1 year. And then the other instance was that, that I'd somehow brought it on to myself, and that,
Is that Catholic guilt? I'm teasing you now a little bit.
That somehow, exactly. It was Catholic guilt, and what did I do to kind of deserve this? But then I think the prayer and the meditation really helped me kind of turn things around. That's the whole thing about Ignatius, which is, let's look at things from different angles. What can I learn from this? So that really became the motivating force, toward the end of the haunting. Wait, I'm being taught something here. What is it?
And that's what I want to get into next, folks. I want to get into your faith next and what it did to your faith.
You're listening to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. The time is now. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Gary Jansen's our guest tonight, folks. We're talking about Holy Ghost. It's a true story, his true story of a haunting that took place right in the very house where he's broadcasting from tonight. And if you're listening on the radio, he's broadcasting from a small room, a playroom for his child. And a lot of creepy things happened in that room, folks. For example, he saw a woman standing at the door. What would that do to you? If you were walking up the stairs, looking into your child's playroom, and all of a sudden there's a woman standing there that doesn't belong there, and all of a sudden she's gone, disappeared. Folks, easy way to get the book, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on that book cover. That'll take you right to a place. Order this book, folks. It'll be there within a few days. No problem there. Even though Canada Post is on strike, the delivery systems aren't on strike. And ghosts never go on strike, I can guarantee that. It's a wonderful, wonderful book, Gary, and a lot of lessons in there. It's a good way, folks, for you to read about a true ghost story. In the middle of the night, the kids are asleep, everything's quiet in the house, you just want to sit down in your comfy chair, get scared a little bit, but safely. This is a great book for that. www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on that book cover. Gary, what did it do to your faith? What has this done to your faith? Did you curse at God and say, "You son of a gun, what are you doing this? Why are you doing this to my family? Why are you doing this to me?" Did it bring you closer to God? Did you shun Him completely?
No, it definitely, it reinterpreted my faith, and I didn't expect it to. Like, I wasn't on that kind of. I just didn't expect that that's what was going to happen, or that would be the outcome as all this stuff was going on. I'm an editor of religion in New York, so there are books that are published, and I'm the editor of them. And religion has been something I've been very interested in for the last 10 years. So, but it always seems strange to me that when you talk about really formal, organized religion, that they'll talk about it. You'll talk about it politically. You'll talk about all the scandals that happen. You'll go to church and this is how we live practically, and that's totally cool. And that's a great part of it. We need to get this information out there. We need to have these conversations. But I realized that so little of it ever incorporated angels or spirits, or God is a spirit, yeah. But wait a minute, how come we never really talk about this kind of stuff? And we almost have taken the supernatural out of religion. Though a lot of people would argue, well, that's not true. Religion's so superstitious. It's the the evil that has created all the evils in all the world. But as an editor, as someone who kind of reads on this stuff and just investigates it all the time, that's not what I see. I really see that the spirit has been taken out of religion, and maybe that's why religion has such problems today. And so what happened was, it just helped me see. So part of the book is an investigation or an examination of what I experienced, but part of it also kind of looks at history, the history of hauntings, and that includes the history of hauntings or the experiences that Catholics felt, so saints.
What did you find out, Gary, when you did your research? Was there a commonality through the people that were haunted?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I did research with just lay people and then people of faith, and so you have saints who experience hauntings. There was Saint John Bosco, who had his big religious experience was when his friend came back. He had a friend who had passed away, and they had made a bet, well, not a bet, but a pact, that whoever died first would come back and give notice that there was something on the other side. And then 3 days later, he has this experience where, he's in this dormitory room and everyone experienced it. Sounds, lights, and this word, these words, "I am saved, John, I am saved." And it wasn't just him who experienced it, but everybody in the room. So if a layperson has an experience, people are very quick to write it off. Oh, it's demonic, or you're crazy. But if a saint has it, well, it must be real then. So there's this kind of double standard that I wanted to, examine. And so that's part of the book as well. So it does talk about, and it looks at the world history or the world religions as well, and just, there's things called the hungry ghosts in Buddhism, these pretas, right? And they are these almost purgatorial spirits that just like are yearning and like in torment. And that was the thing to see, was it blew my mind, how expansive it was. And I guess people maybe know that these things permeate all cultures, but for me it was really just outstanding to see. People have had paranormal, supernatural experiences from the dawn of time.
That's right.
And they're all over. And, so that was very eye-opening to me, and to see those specifics, and to see how, someone in China had a similar experience as someone in Venezuela and things like that.
It seems to be part of the human experience, if you will. It transcends all religion. It transcends all ethnicities. Right across the board, it's going to be, I often say it's going to be funny if that's the final thing, ghosts, that brings the world together in some sort of human family. Whatever it takes for us to stop shooting the butts off of each other, who cares? If it's Walmarts across the world, who cares? Let's just get it done.
You're listening to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. The time is now. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Folks, Gary Jansen, I'm enjoying this conversation tonight. It's the story of a true haunting. His book is called Holy Ghosts, How a Not-So-Good Catholic Boy Became a Believer in Things That Go Bump in the Night. www.nightfrightshow.com, nightfrightshow.com. You can see it going across here. Easy way to get the book. Just click on the book cover associated with tonight's guest. That'll take you right to a place where you can order it from the comfort of your own home. Gary, we've only got a few minutes left. We got about 5 minutes left. Where are you now with this? Has the not-so-nice entity left? Are they both present? Are they both still in the house residing with you? Have you come to some sort of agreement with them?
Well, I don't want to give away the end part of the book, but I can tell you the reason why I wanted to write the book was that really, really convinced me that what we were experiencing was of a supernatural origin, was that there was a very definite beginning and there was a very definite ending, which makes for a perfect story for a book. All books have beginnings, middles, and ends, and this story ended a year later. How that story ended, well, you'll have to read the book. But we're still in the house, and and it's just, and things have, let's just say that my faith and my vision and how open I am to the supernatural has changed forever. It's something I never really thought about a few years ago, and now it's something that, permeates, the way that I see and think about things.
Gary, do you still fear for your family, yourself?
No.
Wonderful.
And that's one thing that Marianne, was really helpful, and also doing research and then finally coming out and like talking to priests about it, and just, and most of them just said, look, these things aren't things that you have to be afraid of. They can be very, disconcerting while they're going on. But a lot of times, you're bringing in a certain sense of, whatever fears lie dormant in you or inside your heart. They can be really magnified when you start experiencing something that's extraordinary like this. So for me, it was a big twist. For me, it was just something that started off frightening, almost damning, and turned into something that was incredibly life-affirming. And it just, it reconfigured who I am.
With the release of the book, have you been persecuted at all by individuals or even by the church?
Well, I think a lot of people have been unhappy with the book. I've had a lot of people who love the book, so I've gotten a lot of good reviews, and and a lot of great people have just written wonderful letters about how much they love the book and love the story and how it helped them with their faith. But it does go off a little bit on it goes outside the parameters of what, Catholic teaching, or what people believe to be Catholic teaching, even though I examine all that stuff inside the book. So I can't say they haven't persecuted me, but I can say that a number of people have been upset by it, and just, challenged by it. And, it's the way of the world. There's going to be people who like it, who don't like it. And, and as long as we're just kind of, fair and good to one another, I think it's okay to have different opinions. So
I agree wholeheartedly, without question.
You're listening to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. The time is now. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Folks, the book is called Holy Ghosts, How a Not-So-Good Catholic Boy Became a Believer in Things That Go Bump in the Night. And things, folks, do go bump in the night quite often, more than you would think, maybe even in your own house. It's the story of a true ghost story. Easy way to get this book, folks, www.nightfrightshow, www.nightfrightshow. You'll see it just running across here. Just type that in Google or just type in Night Fright Show and it'll come right up. Go to the website, click on the book cover, take you right to a place where you can get this book online. Get this book, folks, in the quiet of the still of the night, and you're sitting there in your comfy chair when the house is quiet. This is a great read for you. It'll challenge you also to look at perhaps your own faith in certain directions as well. True ghost story, folks. It'll frighten you, it'll enlighten you, and how does they say, it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry. Gary Jansen's been our guest tonight. Gary, I want to thank you for joining us and for having the courage to write a book like this. Must have taken a lot of courage for you to do that.
Thank you, Brent. It took about a year to make the decision, but I'm really glad I did.
Okay. When they optioned it for the film, did I tell you I was a film composer? I composed for NASA, and I'm working on a feature film for Martin Sheen and Joe Don Baker and those guys right now. So you let me know, and we'll work it out, buddy, because this is a great book.
So I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Brent Holland from Night Fright. See you later.
You're listening to Night Fright, and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio.